Hello friends, I am Welshie, and we've just had the first gameplay trailer for Bendy and the Dark Revival. Let's take a look at what's been revealed and analyse any clues for what the game will contain. The trailer begins with the Joey Drew Studios logo appearing in a pool of rippling ink. We next hear a voice saying something that's intensely creepy.
A pretty girl like you shouldn't be wandering around all by yourself.
This is the same voice that we heard from one of the teaser videos that was released in the run-up to the reveal of the game's title. The video was titled Unknown April 14, so I'm going to call this guy Unknown. Unknown is speaking directly to the player character here, and his tone has a certain creepy, manipulative vibe to it. I think Unknown will be the main antagonist we face in Dark Revival. Next we hear a sharp intake of breath as the player character opens their eyes, and we see what looks to be a part of the studio before us. I think this choice of positioning and design of the room is intentionally meant to remind us of the very start of Chapter 1 of Bendy and the Ink Machine. It looks reminiscent of that first corridor we see in the game, but there are some key differences. First, the end of the hallway doesn't open out into the large room as the one in the previous game, but instead seems to be a smaller, more claustrophobic room. The condition of the building appears to have deteriorated as well, with tears in the wallpaper to the right. What really struck me though was the poster on the left. It's the same poster as we see on the left-hand wall of that very first corridor, but unlike in the first game where that poster is in pristine condition, this one is shredded and torn in several places. Someone or something has damaged this poster, perhaps angry at Bendy himself. The character then raises their hands into the shot, revealing inky limbs and an almost completed right hand. They run their fingers over the ink and we hear a female voice.
What? This feels wrong.
She then reaches down and pulls out what looks like a Ghent pipe, but modified with some type of electrical output or receiver on top. As she moves forward, we next see a workbench with various tools, another section of pipe, and a can of soup. Given the nature of the improvised looking pipe she is holding while looking at this workbench, I strongly believe Dark Revival will involve a crafting mechanic. This may involve seeking out parts and materials to craft weapons and tools to progress in the game, or to make certain tasks and combat easier. As she continues on, we see a Bendy cutout, but the right half of his face is covered in ink, and the rest appears to have suffered scuffs or damage. We know from the Ink Machine chapters that Bendy is quite protective of his little cutouts, and doesn't like it when they are damaged, so the fact this one looks in such a rundown state might mean the Ink Demon is not around to protect and maintain them. A rustling sound makes the character turn sharply, staring down a dark corridor. We can see another Bendy cutout, this one looking faded in places. A searcher appears in the shadows and the character panics and runs to the door. She uses the tool she has to provide power to the door locking mechanism, which opens before her. I think this, combined with that workbench we saw earlier, further confirms my suspicion that this game will have a crafting mechanic. I also think this ties back to the title reveal video, where the narrator of that title said,
Don't let the darkness take you. You may walk with angels, or cower before demons. But one thing always remains. The choices you make.
We're being given a choice of how to handle certain encounters. In this situation, instead of fighting the searcher, we found an alternative way around it by creating a tool to open the door instead of a weapon. Once through the door, we see on the opposite wall a scrolled graffiti message that reads, "The Ink Machine must endure." This could have been put here by one of the many ink creatures that inhabits the studio, as it is their source of life. It must endure in order for them to survive. Charlie, one of the members of the Butcher Gang, walks across the corridor. As he passes, the player character moves forward, grabbing the corner of the wall and leaning around to watch him. I think this will form a part of enhanced stealth mechanics and gameplay, which will allow the player to lean around corners to look for enemies that may be ahead. The character then runs at Charlie and she grabs at him with her entirely ink left hand. Charlie seems to disappear, his inky form evaporating into light, and the character holds her hands up and asks in a panicked voice,
What's happening to me?
This may be some kind of stealth kill? Perhaps the player absorbs or dissolves ink creatures in some way. Either way, this young woman doesn't know what is happening to her, and apparently had no idea she could do that. The title then appears, followed by the release window for the game, coming this fall. Above this is scrawled in white ink, "Break the Cycle." And this, I think, is a hint as to the plot for the game and perhaps who the player character is. The ending of Bendy and the Ink Machine appears to show that Henry has been trapped in a time loop, constantly defeating Bendy, then looping back to the beginning of chapter 1 and starting all over again. But in Dark Revival, we are being tasked with breaking that cycle and possibly freeing Henry. But who would want to free Henry? Linda. Based on Henry's mentions of her in the Ink Machine saga, many have assumed that Linda is his significant other. If Henry has been stuck in some sort of time loop, Linda may be the one to break that loop and free him from the cycle. So what we've seen in this gameplay trailer has all been from Linda's perspective. I absolutely cannot wait for Bendy and the Dark Revival. The Ink Machine remains one of my favourite horror games, and I'm super excited to see what comes next in the Bendy saga. But what do you folks think? Could we be playing as Linda and trying to save Henry? Do you like the idea of crafting weapons and tools? Let me know in the comments section below and click subscribe to stay up to date with the latest theories. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.